Hello everyone, Panda West here, and today we're doing a different list. List week is pretty much over, so it's time to do an all-time list. Not albums, not even songs, artists. My favorite artist of all time so far. So, yeah. This artist will come and go. Your favorite artist will change always. But for now, this is my list. I did a few things to make this list. One was averaging out my ratings of each of their releases and their discographies. And so, yeah. And then I took into account the impact that the bands and artists have on me personally, their personal impact, and yeah. So it's gonna be a mixture of all that, and boom, the list is made. Here it is. So first on this list, number 10 is Weezer. Now, okay, yes, Weezer. I am totally serious. I am 100% serious about this. Do they have a solid career? Do they have a solid discography? Maybe not. Gratitude is bleh. It's awful. An awful thing that should have never existed. Make Believe is also very bleh. Pacific Daydream is the best album I've ever heard. And yeah, those albums exist, but think about it. Pinkerton, Blue Album, Green Album, Maladroit, Ubate, White Album, Hurley. Think of all those albums. Those albums are great. Some of those albums are fantastic. Like Weezer invoke this infectious sound of power pop that I haven't really found in a lot of bands. I mean, yeah, a lot of bands have copied Weezer and are in the same genre as Weezer, but I don't think any of them pull off the same raw energy and enthusiasm that Weezer do. I don't know. I mean, look at Pinkerton. That is just this is kind of the geekiest thing it's the geekiest album I've ever heard. And it's this weird thing about a guy who just wants sex. It's like it makes you think, what in the world is this guy thinking? But I don't know. I have a lot of fun with Weezer, and I think that deserves at least something. Number 9 goes to Pink Floyd. Yeah, there is going to be a lot of bands and artists in this top 10 list that a lot of people think are overrated, but ultimately are still good. And I think this is the first, maybe second, because Weezer, I don't know. Not a lot of people like Weezer like I do, but then again, I don't know. But Pink Floyd, yeah, I will admit, they've made some pretty trash albums. The Division Bell, A Momentary Lapse of Reason, The Final Cut, Atom Heart Mother. Yeah, they made some pretty bad albums. But I don't know. I feel like only those albums really pertain to the whole this band is so boring. Why would anybody listen to that? I only think about that of those albums because they're boring. They're super boring. But with the rest of their discography, I don't really see that. I mean, yeah, there's some jammy moments, there's some long-winded moments, but I never really find them boring. Like my favorite album by them is Wish You Were Here. That album is bookended back and front by two 12 to 13 minute songs. And I love them to death. They're great. And the other 3 songs range from 7, 5, 6 minutes. All of them. So, yeah, I mean, you kind of expect long songs from this band, or at least long-winded songs. Think about Animals. That is what a lot of people consider their best album of all time, if not one of the other 3 of the big 4 Pink Floyd albums. But yeah, I totally get why people love Animals as their first, best album, because they utilize those long-winded songs to their advantage to make something artistic and almost experimental. Animals is bookended. It's kind of the inverse of Wish You Were Here. It's bookended by 2 about 1 minute songs, and the other 3 songs are about 15 to 20 minutes each. So yeah, yeah. So to say that Pink Floyd is just boring, I don't really see it. Because think about that first album. It's crazy, it's weird, and that has a lot to do with Sid Barrett. But even then, after he left, they just went into all these different directions that were equally as tasteful as the next. Besides from like Ummagumma, Atom Heart Mother, A Momentary Lapse of Reason, and Division Bell, those can just go, leave. Number 8, yeah, I wanted to pick a jazz artist for this, and I was having trouble with it, and I ultimately decided one that was there from the very beginning of my jazz experience, and I've listened to the most, and I've gotten some of the most enjoyment out of, and one that excels at mostly all 3 of these aspects is Camozzi Washington. He was there right from the beginning of my jazz experience because he was a new, modern, and successful jazz musician. He had an album on the way that I really liked, and I went through pretty much his entire modern discography, and well, from this decade, and yeah, he's solid in almost every single one of those releases. Because I would have picked maybe Miles, but I haven't heard enough of Miles. Maybe Herbie, but I haven't even heard an album of Herbie yet. Even though I bet if I had heard Herbie's entire discography by now, he would probably be in this position. But I haven't yet. And maybe even Eli Kessler, but I don't know enough of him yet to really say that he's one of my favorites. But Camozzi, I don't know, I've just had the experience with Camozzi, and he's just that good. He's made one of my favorite albums of all time with The Epic, and he's made one of my favorite albums of this year with Heaven and Earth, and the Choice EP wasn't far behind of making my top 10. So yeah, he has a very solid discography, and he's a great fusion artist. Fusion was one of my favorite things to explore first because it eased me into the genre. But I don't know. I feel like Camozzi won't make the list in the future, if there are any future lists of artists that I make. But yeah. So yeah, Camozzi Washington, my current favorite jazz artist right now. Here's a big one. Number 7, the Beatles. Yeah, slap in the face right there, boom. This is the first artist in my top 10 that has made a 10 out of 10 album, in my opinion. There are 3 of these. There are actually 5 albums in my top 10, all with different artists, but the other 2 didn't make the cut because I just haven't heard enough of them yet. But the 3 others are on this list. The Beatles is the first. That 10 out of 10 album is Magical Mystery Tour. I mean, yeah. Blah, 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 Beatles, greatest artist of all time. I used to scoff at these statements, but then I went into their discography, and, you know, it's actually kind of solid. You know, it starts off pretty rickety in the early 60s. I don't really care for those albums, but about 65 is when they really started to find their footing, and then they just kept getting better and peaked at Magical Mystery Tour. And then, like, the White Album, Sgt. Pepper's, Revolver, like, all those albums are great records. And the rest of their albums are pretty good too, like Help, Rubber Soul, Let It Be, Abbey Road. Those are pretty good too. So, I mean, yeah, you can't really go wrong with the Beatles. I mean, they knew how to make pop, and they knew how to make it well. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Speaking of making pop well, number 6, David Bowie. This was a pop star that knew how to not only ride trends, but he knew how to expand those trends into different things. Like, Station to Station could have easily just been another Blue-Eyed Soul album, but it wasn't. It was an experiment of just weirdness. That first album, that title track to Station, kind of says it all for the album. And then the rest is just great soul and art rock and just art pop, and he was a very artsy guy, especially in the 70s. But I don't know, there's always been a certain charm to David Bowie's music that I've always liked. And even in the 90s, when he just started making all this weird music, and nobody knew what he was doing. There is some legitimate quality in some of those albums. Like, Outside, they're not my favorite album by him. It does have some interesting ideas. Earthling is by far the greatest 90s album. And then stuff like Heathen is pretty good. Reality. And then those last 2 albums. Wow. What a great way to go out. And yeah, he just has a very solid discography. There's not... And, like, you wouldn't expect an artist with at least 25 albums to not go you wouldn't expect that to not go past at least maybe 2 out of 10, or maybe even a 3 out of 10. He barely scratches 4 out of 10 with some of these albums. Like, even the worst of his albums don't even really go into 4 out of 10 territory. They just kind of sit in the 5 out of 10 territory, and they just keep going up as you progress through his discography. And there's a lot of 9s in his discography too. So yeah, I'd say that's a pretty solid discography. For how big of a discography he has, it's solid. Number 5 goes to My Chemical Romance. I've heard this band since maybe around 2013, alongside other bands like Nickelback and Hinder and System of a Down. There was a time where I was really into 2000s rock, for better or for worse, mostly for worse, but there were some cases where it was for the better, like System of a Down, and especially this band, My Chemical Romance. They've always just stuck with me. I have always loved their music, and to pimp a The Black Parade has always been a great album, in my opinion, and it is, even now, it's in my top 10. Number 4 goes to Kendrick Lamar. Now, okay, I'm not really super experienced in hip hop. I've heard hip hop maybe as back as 2010, but I didn't really get into it until 2017. And one of the few songs that early in 2017 that really got me into the genre was "You" by Kendrick Lamar. I don't really understand how I found it, but once I did, I just took it and ran. And Kendrick Lamar, unlike some other rappers that I have liked in 2017, Kendrick Lamar stood the test of time and is still one of my favorites. He just puts me in awe with how much focus he has on his music and his lyrics and his raps and his flows. This is the second of artists who have a 10 out of 10 in my book, To Pimp a Butterfly. That is my second favorite album of all time. So yeah, Kendrick Lamar, the Crown Prince of Compton. That's my number 4 pick. Number 3 goes to Minor Threat. Probably the most solid discography I've ever heard. All of their albums that I've heard are 9s, and it's just fast, energetic, hardcore punk that is it just gets you right in the gut. It punches you in the face with how visceral it is. It's hardcore. And to this day, you can see the influence of this one band from Washington, D.C. It's okay. I've been said to my face that I look like Ian MacKaye. That is not the reason why they're on my list, but the thing is, yeah, all of their albums are 9s to me. So that is really the only band to do so, other than the Microphones and My Bloody Valentine. So that at least says something. For my number 2 is Sleater-Kinney. Now this band, oh my god, at first I wasn't really impressed by the band, because I first heard Jumpers. That was my first song by them that I heard, and I was like, it's alright. But then I heard a New Wave, and I was like, okay, I'm slightly intrigued. So then I decided to listen to their entire discography, and I've never been the same again. I've never been the same again. It's kind of astonishing how quick this band came to be one of my favorite artists of all time. Like, I discovered them this year. They're already second place. And I haven't really stanned them or anything. It's just, I really like the music. And I really look forward. I always like looking for artists that sound similar to this band, because I know there are artists that sound similar to this band, like Skrull, stuff like that. Yeah, okay, but I don't know. Sleater-Kinney just have a raw, visceral, emotional sound that I really can hold on to, and just, like, this is music I listen to, and I just want to, like, I'm just like, yes. I just want to rock out, I want to mosh. Similar to Minor Threat, but unlike Minor Threat, they also have their softer moments. And, like, the Hot Rock, that album is full with some really nice, toned down, just sweet stuff that is just some of their greatest songs ever made, like Hot Rock, Get Up, The Size of Our Love, especially. Yes. And then you have their first album, just in your face, just wailing, just ah ah and then you have The Woods, which obviously their best, not their best, but their most popular. And I can definitely see why a lot of people gravitate toward this one, especially. It has a very unique production, which helps it. In a sense, it's very loud, and it's raucous. It's raucous not in the same way Dig Me Out was. There's a whole layer of just boom and oomph to it. And then you have One Beat, my personal favorite. Just, yeah. I mean, they have a solid discography. There's no bad album in this band's discography. There's no bad song in this album's discography. In this artist's discography. But there's barely a decent song in this discography. I think the worst song is probably Fade. That's still a good song. When your worst songs are pretty good, that says something. And some of their best songs are one of my favorite songs of all time. And yeah, they've definitely proven to me how good of a band they are in the about 12 months I've known them. And last but certainly not least, number 1 goes to Rush. Okay, this is the third one of my top 10 favorite albums, or my 10 out of 10s. My 10 out of 10 is 2112. That is my favorite album of all time. That is my favorite album of all time. This band makes so much noise for 3 people. It's kind of astonishing how they can pull that much noise off with just 3 people. They are masters. They're all masters of their respective instruments. Geddy Lee, arguably one of the best bassists of all time. Alex Lifeson, arguably one of the best guitarists of all time. Neil Peart, arguably, maybe even not arguably, the greatest drummer of all time. That man, I aspire to be him. That, as a drummer, I aspire to be him. That's a master right there. That's a master artist on the drums. And an amazing songwriter. I mean, he literally wrote 2112 the song. So, yeah. And I don't know, they've always seemed like this very multifaceted band that was never comfortable in staying in one spot. They're always changing, and for better or for worse. They do have some albums that are questionable, but they have at least one great album for each of their little phases that they've had. I don't know. They've always made good music out of something, even if they weren't comfortable. Even if they didn't seem comfortable in that position, they've always made good music out of it. It always astonishes me. This is probably the definitive power trio, and just wow, Canada. So yeah, as of right now, those are my 10 favorite artists of all time. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm Panda Wes, and peace.